Good evening. This is Dale Lamgard, Webb University. This is Mels 605, summer 2016. This is our 9th weekly session with Zoom, July 20th, Wednesday evening. I've got 7 o'clock, 7:01, so we'll get started. A reminder that the deadline was a couple of days ago for submissions to TaskStream if you're trying to graduate and do your license this summer. All of your submissions into TaskStream should be complete by now. There were 3 discussion boards that you got to pick from this week. And then you should be to the point where next week is the last discussion board. It is required. It is on the book, Strength-Based Leadership by Rath and Conchi. That's from the Gallup organization. We will cover the Gallup's receiver interview as one of the 4 types of interviews that you will be subjected to if and when you apply for an administrative job. I will cover that. Maybe that I get to that tonight, probably not. But definitely I will cover interviewing next week. So as you can see on the screen, where we are, we're in week 9, facilitating change, the change process, community and diversity. Those were our topics for this week. I'm very pleased. All of you have done well on your discussion boards, your turn in, your assignments. I don't have any, I didn't see any of the things this week that concerned me. I think you've all got it. So in terms of TaskStream and Blackboard, so that's good. Looking at Zoom session 9 for this week, I want to talk to you about disciplinary data, incident reporting, code of conduct. I have a conference presentation that I did at the large state conference in 2011, just before I retired from CMS. The point of me discussing these things with you is everybody understands due process. You had Mels 603 where you had law and finance, and they talked to you about due process. I want to follow up with that in terms of what due process means. Due process not only means substantive and procedural. Substance is what is the due process in your district, and procedural is what procedure do you follow. And to that end, I've got a couple of documents here that I want to make sure that I cover with you. I can close that weekly schedule. All right, so let's start out with substantive. Every district has a code of conduct of some sort. I worked in CMS for 20 years, the last 20 of my career, and so I will use theirs as the example. Every district puts out from their Board of Education, obviously it's done by the central office staff, but it comes through the Board of Education, their code of conduct, which outlines the process that you will use for discipline as an employee, and it also gives a range of consequences. Let's see. And of course, again, it's from the Board of Education. Hey, Christy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm excited to be here as always. I hope you are.
Good. I am in Boone.
Good. I'm at Sunset Beach.
All right.
We're about as far apart as you can get.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that my internet connection was. It doesn't look too stormy this afternoon. We had a really bad storm yesterday evening and last night. And, I'm having to work off my hotspot. It knocked out the Wi-Fi here at the condo, so I'm going to have to get that at some point, but I didn't have time to worry about that today. But
Right.
Hopefully we have good weather this afternoon. We'll be
Exactly.
Well, thank you for joining me.
Well, and I may be on and off because, like I said, I'm in Boone, and you know how that connection is as well.
Exactly. That was the point. My connection if mine starts to go, I'll have to end early like I have the last couple of weeks.
That's great. That's fine.
But hopefully we'll get through this one this evening. What I wanted to cover due process. It is set forth the actual the substance is set forth by the Board of Education, and generally inside of that it has all of the rules that you're supposed to follow as a school administrator. Has a message, character, has all the good, the positive stuff, and has rights and responsibility, and dress code, and all of those. Everything is set forth in this document. Everything that you can enforce as an administrator is in here. I think I've told this story before, but I'll repeat myself. I'm old. All code of conducts have a range of consequences that you can apply as a school administrator. Once you go through the procedure, you've done your interviews, you've interviewed witness, you've taken witness statements, you talked to the student, all of those kinds of things. Generally, codes of conduct across North Carolina have some leeway. They have a range of consequences. And so as long as you stay in that range of consequences, you'll be fine. Now, every decision you make as an assistant principal can be appealed to the principal, and every decision that the principal makes can be appealed to the area superintendent or to the superintendent in smaller districts. So as long as you follow the process of due process in terms of you have done all your due diligence, and as long as you have stayed within the range of punishment options, you'll be fine. Now, that doesn't mean that as an assistant principal, if you give a 2-day suspension, the principal may reduce it to 1 just to be a hero, but that doesn't reflect badly on you. Where we get into trouble as administrators with disciplinary incidents is when we veer outside of the parameters, either way, either too little or too much. And let me explain that to you. There are 2 standards in law. I'm sure you covered this in 603, and that's why I said I didn't have y'all, but I'm sure that somebody covered. Arbitrary and capricious. Arbitrary is when you don't give enough punishment. For example, Christy and I are caught out back in a scuffle. And the book says, we get from 1-day suspension to 3-day suspension. Well, we give me the 3-day suspension, and we give Christy a warning. That's arbitrary. You can't. That's against the law. You can't find 2 people doing the same thing and give one less than the book calls for. That would be arbitrary. Now, people ask me, well, Dale, what if we gave you 3 and Christy 1? We would still be in the range. Well, we'd probably be okay on the arbitrary on that case, because probably I've been in trouble every week, and this is probably Christy's first time. So as long as I don't go under the minimum, I'm okay. Where we get in trouble on the arbitrary is when we go under the minimum. It looks like that we're showing favoritism, or we're being arbitrary in our decisions. Now, the capricious standard is when we give more than the book calls for. I have a favorite story. If I've told it before, please excuse me. In my former role in the central office, I was in charge of these kinds of things in auxiliary services. And so when we had a big incident like a gun or a violent assault or something of that nature, I would go out and conduct the hearing myself and act as my own attorney and the accused would bring their attorney, and the school district would have the associate general counsel there representing the school. And I would do the due process hearing for long-term suspension or exclusion. Because those were the cases that were on the news and in the paper, and so I'd go out and handle those myself. And I was doing one at a high school. I had an 18-year-old student, and he brought his attorney, but not his parents. His parents said, "No, he's old enough. He can." So they sent an attorney with him, and he came in, and he was advised that any statement that he made would be held against him. And I was very surprised that his attorney let him speak, and I was even more surprised when he admitted that he had brought 2 large knives to school with the intent of hurting somebody. And so when we went to closing statement, his attorney argued that the case should be thrown out on a technicality because the punishment that the school gave was capricious, that the code of conduct only called for a 5-day out-of-school suspension for a knife, and he was given a 10-day out-of-school suspension. Well, the problem is that this was a young attorney just out of law school doing pro bono work, and he had gone online and found the code of conduct for elementary school. This was a high school student. And so when he discovered that the punishment was within the range, he then tried to strike the student's testimony. It's too late. It's been recorded. Kids sworn on a Bible. And so that was one of those where at that point we decided as a district that we would make one handbook to try to avoid confusion like that in the future. But that's an example of capricious. The elementary book, the suspension was from 1 to 5 days. The high school handbook was from 5 to 10 days, and the school had given the 10-day suspension. So they were not was not a capricious act. So again, we go back to arbitrary and capricious. Those are the 2 standards when you are disciplining students. Arbitrary is when you give too little and you gave somebody else more for the same infraction, and you got outside of you got out of your lane. And capricious is when you give too much. You have to make sure that you understand all the rules and the ranges, the tiers, the levels. Most codes of conduct use either a tier system or a level system. We at one time used a level in CMS, and now they've gone to a tier system. But you have to understand that you can go up and down, but you can't go off the board, either too high or too low. And so, as you can see, as I am rolling through here, it shows a range, minimum and maximum. Just don't get out of your lane. Don't go under the minimum or above the maximum. And it goes through each one of the things that each infraction that you would find. Now, where administrators get in trouble with the school district and law enforcement is when they classify something differently than it actually is, so that they can give less punishment or more punishment. That is a problem. For example, if 2 kids are fighting on the bus, that's to be put into NCYs as fighting, not as bus misbehavior. That's a dodge that some schools use to make their numbers look better and to hold their numbers down, especially on acts of crime and violence. To that end, most all codes of conduct clearly define, give definitions, have a glossary of terms for infractions. Now, if that is not good enough, especially for acts of crime and violence, I'm going to stop the share here, and I'm going to go. The state puts out a handbook, and it is I'll have to get out of this, make it stop. All right. And Okay. And go back. It'll take a second, but I'll get back there. And go back to Zoom session 9. Here we go. All right. The state of North Carolina, the state school board and the state superintendent, through DPI, have created a reporting manual. Again, this is the primary way that administrators get in trouble with discipline with their administration. So what they do is they categorize things as less than they really are. Or so that they don't have to report certain acts. The state of North Carolina has put out a disciplinary data reporting manual, and in that manual it says what has to be reported, and it's pretty much anything that goes on at school. If it's an incident, it has to be reported. Now, please remember, in North Carolina, we don't report outcomes, which would be like suspensions. We report incidents, what happened. So I've had principals, their rationale to me when I'd come out about why didn't you do this or that or the other as their supervisor, the rationale would be, well, I didn't suspend that kid, so I didn't think I had to report it. That's not the way it works. We report what happened. We report incidents, not outcomes, which would be like a suspension. Disciplinary data reporting is organized around incidents. Regardless of what you did to the kid, you have to tell the state what happened, and you have to tell law enforcement if it's an act of crime and violence. And here are all the rules, and here are all the laws that go along with that. And where you get in bad trouble is you don't report something to law enforcement and it gets found out later on. The parent goes and files a police report or sues the school, or the kid does something, you hide a weapon and the next week he brings another weapon and stabs a kid or shoots a kid. That's a lot of legal exposure for not only you but for the school district. And so if you don't report acts of crime and violence, you will lose your license. So here are the 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 acts of violence. Now, there's 16 acts of crime and violence. These are the acts of violence. These count against you in your persistently dangerous schools calculation. You know that No Child Left Behind says 2 major things. No child has to go to a low-performing school, or no child has to go to a persistently dangerous school. And the consequences are the same for the district. You either have to bus those kids to another school, or you have to restructure that school. And so here are the 9 things that can't, if more than, and there's a ratio, and it's 1 for every 200 kids. You can't have more than one of these incidents per every 200 kids for the school year. So that's 5 per 1,000 kids. And don't be an idiot like I had a principal one time say, well, that doesn't count because we don't have 1,000 kids. No, the ratio is 1 to 200 kids, or 0.5%. So there are the 9 acts of crime and violence. And then, of course, there are 16 acts. But here are all the things that have to be reported. There's nothing that's not on this list. Everything that happens in your school, there's a law that has to be. Cyberbullying, that has to be reported. It has to be reported to law enforcement. Procedures for reporting the data, and it goes through and it gives you examples and exemplars of how to categorize things. Each incident has a prefix, PD, RO, or UB. PD stands for persistent dangerous. That one's going to count against you in your calculation. RO means it's not going to count against you, but you have to report it to police. UB is just unacceptable behavior. Now, there are 4 UBs that have to be reported to police also, because they are violations of state law, and I'll show you those in just one second. But here's how to report all this stuff. Here are the definitions. You need this handbook. You will have to do discipline. UAP generally has to do discipline. And you have to report what you did to the state using PowerSchool. So you better make sure you know all the rules. Don't think you can just kind of make it up as you go. See the prefixes PD and RO. Now, as I said, there are 4 UBs that have to be reported to law enforcement. They are communicating threats, affray, disorderly conduct, and there's another one here somewhere. There it is. I think it's alcohol possession. All right. And here are the 17 categories of reporting for acts of crime and violence: assault with serious injury, assault using a weapon, assault on school personnel, bomb threat. Well, you can see those. I'll let you read those now. And you can see every one of these has a prefix that tells you what has to happen with it. Now, consequence, action types. You can see there's everything in here from out of school suspension, 365 expulsion, all the way down to conference. So this notion that if I don't do a certain thing with a kid, if I don't suspend a kid, I don't have to tell the state. No, that's not correct. I mean, there's conference. The state wants to know. Even if you pull the kid aside, if there's a written referral on a kid, there better be a corresponding incident report in NCWIS. Now, the only way that you can print out a legal suspension notice in the state of North Carolina is to enter the incident into NCWIS, and it generates a legal suspension letter. Now, if your school or school district makes one up on the side, I would be wary of that. I'm not saying they're breaking the law. Quote me accurately. But I would be wary of that, because when you go to court, the only one that I've ever seen that was valid in court, may be different where you live, but the only one that I ever saw that was valid in court in Charlotte was the one that was generated from PowerSchool. When you put a suspension in PowerSchool, it will generate an official suspension letter, one for the kid and a copy for the parent and a copy for the file. That's done automatically. Your system may have your school district may have a different system in that. If you do, I would check and make sure that if we went to court, that the legal document was there. And so all of these codes. Now, as I said, acts of crime and violence have very, very explicit definitions, and so you can't be just making it up as you go what you think it is. Generally, the minor infractions are defined in your code of conduct. 2 kids with closed fists striking one another in the face is a fight. It's not aggressive behavior, as I have seen it categorized. So make sure that you understand that there are definitions. You can't just kind of pick and choose what you want to report. There are definitions, and you have to report along those reporting guidelines. And so for each of those acts of crime and violence, all 16 of them, there is an explicit definition that goes along with that. Now, I'll give you another example. I got a call from the legal department that was part of the group that I supervised. I got a call from them, and they said, we've got a lawsuit from an employee. He's suing us because his workman's compensation has been denied. I said, well, let me go over to the school and find out what the deal is. And so I wrote over to the school, and I asked the principal, I said, what's the deal with the behavior modification technician, the BMT, who is suing us because we have denied his workman compensation? She said, well, I reported that he was hurt. here on campus, we had a violent student, and we were trying to get him in a confined room, and he got hurt, and I reported it as assault on school official, employees, or volunteer without injury. And I said, okay. Explained, she said, well, I put it in without injury because although he did miss 6 months and have to basically have his arm reattached, his shoulder, the surgery was successful, and they felt like he would eventually get the use of his arm back. And I said, did you read the definitions? That clearly falls in, and so on the basis of she reported no injury in Power School, which is the legal report to the state, the Human Resources Division denied his workman compensation claim. When in fact, he had a permanent or protracted condition that caused extreme pain. He had permanent protracted loss, impairment of the function of any bodily member or organ, and had prolonged hospitalization. So on the 6 bullet points here or tests of whether you were seriously injured, he met the standard for 3 of them. If you meet the standard for any one of the 6, you have been assaulted, resulting in serious injury, and you are entitled to a workman's compensation. That is a job-related injury. You are entitled to workman's compensation, short-term disability when you're out, and those kinds of things. But his benefits were denied on the basis that the principal reported that he was not injured during the assault. So it's more than just paperwork here, folks. These decisions carry weight when you go to court, when the legal system gets involved, when employee assistance, human resources get involved. These kinds of things carry weight. We look like really bad guys denying a man's workman's compensation claim when he had to have multiple surgeries and was out of work for 6 months as a result of an assault by a student. That didn't go well. I mean, those things hit the news pretty easily. These investigative reporters that all news stations now have, these are the kind of stories they just love. And attorneys, ambulance, I don't know if I should use the term ambulance chasers, but there's a lot of attorneys out there that love cases like this too, because they know, government agencies have deep pockets, and they have to maintain a certain level of goodwill. They can't be seen as being the bad guy like a lot of private industry or businesses could. We're supposed to be better than that, and so they love to sue us. And when we've done something dumb like this, I guess we deserve to be sued. But again, you need to make sure that you know these definitions, that you understand that conducting due process investigations, making sure that you have questioned the student, he's had an opportunity to explain his side of the story, that you have collected written statements from witnesses, that you have followed the guidelines, you're not arbitrary, you haven't given too little punishment or capricious, given too much, that you have reported it accurately both to the state and to law enforcement, that you have categorized it correctly. All of those things are important. They carry legal consequences with them. I can't tell you how important that is. Unfortunately, during my time in the central office in CMS, most of the folks that we had to take disciplinary action against in terms of our employees, our administrative staff, most of them were over these kinds of things. It used to be financial things. They're still a problem, but these kinds of things have replaced financial improprieties or irregularities as the number one reason why school administrators get disciplined now by central office administration. We don't want to. We want you to get it right. But we have to follow the law too. And the law says that if you don't do these things, that it is a misdemeanor. And that means we would have to take action against you. So make sure that you look at this one. Again, this is on week 9, Zoom session week 9. I've covered the code of conduct, and I've covered the state reporting manual. Okay. Let me go back to Zoom session 9. All right, now, most districts will help you. They will kind of marry these two things together for you. We did in CMS. In 2007, I commissioned this manual. And that's when, obviously, it's a little bit older. It says NC-WISE. It's now PowerSchool. But NC-WISE was the last generation before it became PowerSchool. And so what we did in CMS, we commissioned a manual. There's my name on it. Where we kind of put this together for you. We married all the things, these different documents that I'm talking about, we put it all in one and gave you a guide, a how-to guide. And we even had, we had all the rules, we had everything together, and even how to go about, you can see the screens, how to go about doing everything that you needed to do, a step-by-step with screen captures, with pictures. Now, I know that maybe some of the smaller districts can't afford this, but a lot of the bigger districts have got this for you to help put these together for you, so it's all in one document, and it's just basically follow page to page. Very simple. If your district that hasn't done this for you, then you're going to have to kind of put it together for yourself. But hopefully out there somewhere, I was having so much trouble with folks getting it wrong, and I didn't like having to be the bad guy all the time and discipline people for getting it wrong. Just commissioned a manual for them. And after that, the number of incidents really of people getting it wrong really decreased. And so this was a really good thing, not just because I thought it was or commissioned or paid for it, but it ended up, we had a lot less trouble with folks getting it wrong mistakenly. Now, the folks who intentionally got it wrong because they were trying to do a cover-up or a hide or whatever, that didn't change that. And we still had to get after those people. But people who wanted to get it right got it right once we had this manual in place. And so for you, if you don't have the manual and you want to get it right, you'll have to kind of put the two manuals together. The state manual and your local code of conduct, you'll have to kind of put them together if you want to get it right, if your district hasn't already done it for you. Now, I want to talk about prevention for a little bit. After the fact, things can get bad for you as an administrator in North Carolina. If you have a lot of acts of crime and violence, things will get bad for you. I'll tell you right now. It's just like being low performing academically. If first year you have more than 1 per 200, one incidence of violent incidents per 200 students the first year, you'll be on the watch list. And then if you don't pass your state audit, or if you do and your numbers still are out of control in terms of the number of violent incidents, if you get declared persistently dangerous, you'll get replaced. The administrative team will get replaced. Nobody's going to bus kids anymore across town or across the county to a different school. That's just not happening anymore. We tried that a couple times in CMS. Didn't really work. And after that, we did the second option, which was to restructure. What restructure means is that you bring in a new administrative team and you have everybody reapply for their jobs, and you can't hire more than 50% of the people back. You do a restructuring. Typically, it's done for academics, but it could also be done for disciplinary data incidents. Again, if you are persistently dangerous, it's going to happen. Now, you say, well, Dale, what can I do? I mean, if these things happen, my only option is just not report them, is to cheat and hope I don't get caught. Well, hope's not a plan. And so for our folks in CMS, I hired a criminalist. And together we worked on what can we do to decrease these incidents in these schools. We don't want to put people in a position where they're forced to cheat or lose their job. What can we do to help them get through when they're in tough situations. And so what we came up with was this. Let me go back to this. This is a conference presentation, and it worked pretty well, and the state saw that our numbers were coming down for about, well, from 2007 to 2011, a 5-year period, our numbers dropped pretty significantly on the number of acts of violence. And so the state asked me, what did you do? Are you cheating? And I said, no, we're not cheating. Let me go to a new share here. We're not cheating. What I've done is I've hired a criminalist, and he and I together have worked on a program, and we're going out and we're having our administrators go through this, but we're also going out and doing audits. I've got a little audit team that we're going out, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to identify antecedent behaviors that lead to violent incidents. And so you say, well, Dale, what's an antecedent behavior? An antecedent behavior is a smaller, less serious behavior that if unaddressed and left alone and allowed to continue will become a more serious behavior. Generally, violent acts are not just one-offs. There's been a building up to that violent act. And let me give you some examples. If I walk into a school building and I watch, during the day, if I watch kids at lunch, unstructured time, if I watch kids at class change in the hallways, and I see a lot of inappropriate touching, inappropriate displays of affection, a lot of hugging, kissing, hands in one another's pockets, that kind of thing, I will bet you we will have some sexual offenses which count against you, either rape, sexual offense, sexual assault, or indecent liberties. Pretty soon we'll start seeing those. I used to be a boy, and so I can say this: boys are dumb. If they see that kind of behavior going on, they think that they have the opportunity to do that also, not understanding that it might be okay with that girl for that boy to display that behavior with her, but not for them. Obviously, it shouldn't be that way. Nobody should be displaying that, but boys are particularly dumb about things like that. And so if you see a lot of excessive displays of affection, you'll begin to see sexual assault, sexual offenses, sex crimes, you'll begin to see those. If you see a lot of gang symbols, bandanas, tattoos, symbols on clothing, symbols on skin, eventually you'll have weapons, and you'll have assaults with those weapons. If you see a lot of motorcycle club paraphernalia and references, T-shirts, jackets, colors, as they're known of. We don't call them motorcycle gangs anymore. They're now known as criminal enterprises. But if you see a lot of that, you'll begin to see a lot of drugs being trafficked in your building. Once you see drugs trafficked in your building, you'll see weapons, because if you got money on you or drugs, people know that the weapons start coming in. With weapons, you start having assaultive behaviors with those weapons. Again, acts of violence. If you see a lot of pushing and shoving, a lot of coming and going, to and froing, is what I call it. You see a lot of physical contact. You'll begin to see a lot more assaultive behaviors, fights, if you have a lot of fights, that leads to assaultive behaviors. And so those would be antecedents. And so let me work through this one for you right quick. I'm keeping an eye on my time here. Gang activity. If you allow kids to be on cell phones and texting in school, you'll see a lot of bullying and cyberbullying. And let me remind you, anytime you have an act of crime and violence, the first call you make is the police department, not the central office. When people would call in and say, so-and-so just happened at my school, and I would say, you call the superintendent's office, or the deputy, or, whoever you have to report to. When they would call me, I'd say, did you call the police? And they'd say, no, I called you first. Hang up, call the police first. Sexting, sexual harassment, cyberbullying, gang activity. Now, one of the things I want to make sure that this state manual I just showed you, the disciplinary day reporting, has a section on cyberbullying. My recommendation to you is, if you see any cyberbullying going on whatsoever, doesn't matter about if it occurred over the weekend or out of school or whatever, I would call the police in immediately. Those things can get away from you very fast, and they get a lot deeper. I live in my regular home. You get older and you're tired, you live in different places, but my regular home is at Lake Norman, Cornelius, North Carolina, which is in the northern part of Mecklenburg County on the lake. Our home high school there is Huff. It's only been around about 10 years. They've recently had a situation there where there was some cyberbullying going on, and they got the police involved, thankfully, did the right thing. And it turned out to be a really bad situation with pictures and activity with underage girls, and some people are going to jail. It's bad that it happened. The good thing was the administrators there took it seriously and didn't just try to sweep it under the rug and say, oh, we're a perfect school, nothing ever happens here. Cyberbullying gets very deep and very ugly, very serious, very fast. So that would be one of those things I would definitely make sure I got law enforcement involved in. There's some federal guidelines, No Child Left Behind, what I was referring to earlier, that said that, you can't have acts of violence. If you do, we're going to restructure your school. Principal and assistant principal and administrative team will lose their job. The Board of Education in North Carolina developed guidelines, total of 5 for 100, or 0.5, which would be 1 for every 200. So that's 1 incident for every 200 kids. And if they come out and you haven't done anything to address these behaviors, one of the things that used to drive me crazy, that's why I have no hair, is when I would ask these schools that were having these violent offenses what their plan was, to try to address those for another year, and they would tell me, we're going to go to school uniforms. I don't even know how to respond to somebody that stupid. That's just children behaving badly, dressed similarly. School uniforms is not a plan. What are you going to do to address these behaviors? School uniforms can be part of a school-wide system of management, but it is not a plan on how to stop violent behavior. But yes, if you exceed your limit the first year, you go on the watch list. You have to develop a plan of what you're going to do. So that's why we developed this Persistently Dangerous. We did this program for them where we would come and work with them on decreasing these antecedent behaviors and do audits with them to try to help them stop the little stuff before it became the big stuff. And here again are the violent offenses that count against you. Again, there are 16 acts of crime and violence. Only 9 are considered violent acts that count against you. There are some crimes that don't count, like alcohol possession, drug possession. Possession of a weapon doesn't count, but assault with a weapon does. Assault on school personnel without injury doesn't count against you, but assault with injury does count against you. You need to know the rules. They're all in that manual I just showed you. Once you get that designation, you keep it for a whole year, and you have to have a plan, and you have to be audited, and you have to figure out a way to get out of that. That's the deal. Is getting yourself out of it before that second year things go bad. It's going to be somebody else's problem then, because we're going to have to get somebody else in that school. probationary status for 1 year. And you have to transfer to another one, or school has to be restructured. May determine school is persistent dangerous school. Watch list of probated schools shall implement additional strategies. So you have to have a plan in terms of what you're going to do to address these behaviors. And if that child that's been a victim of violence, they can transfer out. And so we did this violence prevention education, and this is basically the short and dirty of it, but there was actually some more meat to this. But we worked through all these causes and responses to violence, your psychological, socioeconomic, cultural, political factors, risk factors that contribute to violence, and things that we could work on in terms of the organization of the school, protective factors that we could increase. These are the good things. We did, here are your anti-violence measures, and we did all those. We did a gang awareness. Again, this is a overview of all the different modules that we had. We had modules that went along with these. We did a gang awareness education module, and just to show you some of the things that we had. We teach about the types of gangs, the ones that we've identified locally. These were all pictures. Criminal enterprise, that's motorcycle gang. At what level and what kind of gangs they were. The ones that we had identified locally, the levels of involvement, and we tried to determine those from the kids. Here's graffiti from the district that told us who was there. Here's things that, as I said, symbols that were confiscated, clothing and other things, tattoos that we made kids cover up. I love the fingernails. 1313, that's Sereno 13 or MS 13. Looking for these kinds, if you see these kinds of things, you've got gang behavior, and there's steps that you can take to inhibit that gang behavior. I mean, you can put students out of school for gang behavior. We did a unit on sexual harassment, identification, and prevention. We went through Title IX, all the federal statutes, state statutes. We went through bullying and harassing behaviors. These are the violent, I was talking about the hitting, the pushing, the pulling, those kinds of things. Did a section on sexual harassment specifically of staff and students, student to staff, sexual misconduct. We had a section on sexting, and that's how the cyberbullying one got started eventually at Huff High School, was through sexting, sending pictures. Again, sexual harassment. And so we assisted, again, state says you have to have a plan. And so what we did is we had a plan, and then we had, gave examples. So we had a plan, a district-wide plan, and we put the school through those. We would do staff development with them, and we would do those modules. We'd go out and do regular audits of the behavior that we saw in the school. And generally, we were pretty successful in toning down the antecedent behaviors, and which toned down the bigger behaviors. And so it's not just, discipline is not just, I'll deal with whatever happens. There are consequences for what does happen, and you have to take steps to stop those things from happening. And this is the module on sexual harassment. I kept a lot of it. This would be a good one for you to spend some time. Obviously, my time is about to run short. And we had some resources. But again, you got to follow the guidelines for due process. You got to follow the process. You got to use your district's code of conduct, and then you've got to report it accurately and define it accurately for the state. You've got to involve law enforcement in acts of crime and violence. You've got to take the initiative to try to reduce those acts of crime and violence if they're out of control in your building. There's more to it than just, squatting a child on the behind like, 50 years ago. Those days are gone. Discipline, behavior. I haven't even touched on PBIS. That's another discussion for another day. I generally don't cover that. I generally cover that in 603. A system to work with normal behaviors, normal misbehaviors. That would be positive PBIS, positive behavior intervention system. What I've talked to you tonight is about the big stuff, the serious stuff. But you have to follow all these laws and policies. But prior to that, obviously, every school in the state has to have some sort of a disciplinary system. The State Department recommends PBIS, and most everybody is doing that. I cover that pretty extensively in 603. But tonight, I'm covering the legal stuff, the stuff that matters for you out in the real world. Hopefully, we're going to turn you loose here soon to get a job. This is the stuff that really matters. Making sure that you have followed due process. Make sure that you have followed the code of conduct in your district. Make sure you have followed the reporting manual for the state, making sure that you have notified law enforcement of acts of crime and violence, making sure that you have a program in place to address antecedent behavior so that you don't have too many acts of crime. One's too many, but there is a formula, again, the number of acts of crime and violence that are too many by state and federal regulation. And this is, you're free to use this material. I created this. You're free to use it. This is an outline for how a district should put together a program to decrease violent activity in their district. I included the sexual harassment module, but there's a couple more modules that were developed more out in the schools. But there they are. So I see I've got about just a couple minutes left here. If you have questions about any of this stuff, please don't hesitate to call me, email me. I'll be glad to. I consult on some of these things sometimes. Unfortunately, I became an expert because I was the state's biggest customer on acts of crime and violence since I was in charge of the largest district in the state at the time, and we had the most incidents. I became their best customer, and so unfortunately, I became an expert against my will in this stuff. But I would be glad to talk or work with you if you have issues or problems. Next week, I'm going to cover the 4 types of interviews that you can be subjected to nowadays. There's a pre-interview, and when I say there are 4 types, there's actually either a written beginning interview or an oral. They're a little bit different. And then there's a group interview, and then there's a principal-led interview, and then there's the superintendent's interview. So there's actually 4 types. One of them has 2 options. I will cover those with you and some of my thoughts on interviewing, Dale's top 10 for interviewing. I'll cover all that for you next week in our last session. I'm going to send an email reminder, but I'm going to have to go early next week. We're doing the conference on Monday and Tuesday, and then we have as I said last week, I think we have a debrief on Wednesday. And so I'm going to have to go earlier. I'm guessing maybe 5 o'clock, and I'll put that email out probably later tonight or tomorrow. But I'm going to go. Our last session next Wednesday will be at 5 o'clock. I don't think that'll be a problem for any of you, but I will do my session at 5 if you want to join me. If not, as always, it will be on YouTube later. I see my time is up for the evening. Christy, I hope you're having a good time in Boone, the rest of you. I will see you all next week. Y'all have a good week. Thank you.